Hello everyone. For this week's special video, I asked you all to pick a topic from several that I'd been tossing around in my head for this year's Halloween video, since Morbid Mom only made friends with one infamous serial killer's kids after all. The clear winner of the poll was an unusual / 1 in a million death, which at the time of writing this script commands 46% of the total votes cast. For those of you that voted for the other topics that didn't win, don't worry, I'll get to all of them at some point. And to everyone that left the many excellent topic suggestions in the comments of the poll, I've added many of them to my topics list to cover in future videos I release on the channel. Not long after making the poll, it soon became clear what the likely victor would be, and so I began my research into several different topics that fit my description of both unusual and 1 in a million deaths, and I assure you that today's topic is both unusual and 1 in a million, as the details of today's video's deadly incident border on unbelievable. I hope you all enjoy, and thank you again for your continued support of my channel. Over the course of my time making these videos, I've covered several aviation incidents, all of which were involving small, local airlines. One of the earlier videos on my channel covered the story of Yeti Airlines Flight 103, a deadly collision which took place at the infamous Let Airport in Nepal. The crash, which resulted in the deaths of 18 people, also prompted an in-depth investigation into the factors that contributed to the collision. The inquest found that Yeti, a company that had a history of numerous crashes, had consistently disregarded industry standards for their crew training and had regularly pressured their crews to fly in potentially dangerous weather conditions, seeking to increase the company's bottom line as much as possible, no matter the risk. The repercussions of this crash sent waves through Nepal's aviation industry and resulted in the creation of Yeti's subsidiary, Terra Air, in an effort to separate their short takeoff and landing plane fleet from the Yeti Flight 103 collision. However, as frequent viewers of the channel are likely aware, Terra Air would carry on Yeti's tradition of a spotty crash record, as the string of poor and frankly confounding decision-making by the crew of Terra Air Flight 193 that resulted in the plane slamming into a hillside in rural Nepal, a topic I made a video about a few months back, clearly showed. And much like with Yeti and Terra, the airline that is the focus of today's video was a small regional airline in the African nation of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which I'll refer to for the remainder of the video as the DRC, with a similarly checkered history, an airline known as Philair. Philair was founded in the year 1987 and was based out of the Ndolo Airport in the capital city of the DRC, Kinshasa. Philair offered regional flights to the remote airstrips in several villages scattered across the country, offering flights from Kinshasa to the towns of Idiofa, Muanda, Matadi, Kikwit, Boma, Kiri, Bandundu, and several other settlements across the nation, servicing them with its modest fleet of just 2 airplanes. The airline would experience its first incident just about a year after its founding, when, in 1988, a Vickers Viscount Type 757 registered 9Q CTS was destroyed and written off by the airline after its engines caught fire as the plane made its final approach into Chikapa Airport. Fortunately, the pilots were able to land the plane successfully in a clearing in the jungle nearby, and no one was killed in the incident. Philair would survive the controversy resulting from the incident and continued to dispatch its modest fleet on regional flights throughout the DRC. The next incident involving a Philair aircraft took place less than a decade later in July of 1994. A Lockheed L-188 Electra owned by Philair, registered 9Q-CGD, was damaged beyond repair in Angola. There is very little information available about this incident, as even basic information such as the exact date in July on which the incident took place, or the exact location in Angola that the plane was destroyed, have not been made available to the public or have been lost over time. Following this incident, the plane was written off by Philair, and the regional airline continued to service its regional routes throughout the DRC, with its modest fleet of 2 planes without incident for the next 16 years. However, this streak would be snapped in 2010, in possibly one of the most bizarre aviation incidents ever, an incident that would be the most deadly in Philair's history. On August 25, 2010, in the village of Semendwa, located in the western DRC, 18 passengers and 3 crew members loaded aboard a Let L-410 turbojet, registered 9Q-CCN, which was owned by Philair, for a brief 51-mile flight to the nearby town of Bandundu, one of several stops of the day for the aircraft, as it was completing a round-robin route that began in the city of Kinshasa, making its first stop in the town of Kiri, and from there, the aircraft continued along its route, next making a stop in the town of Bokoro. The plane then flew from Bokoro to Semendwa, with the stop in Bandundu being the last scheduled stop on the route's itinerary for the day, before the plane was slated to finally make its return to Kinshasa. The captain aboard this flight was a 39-year-old British man named Chris Wilson, accompanied in the cockpit by a 62-year-old Belgian man named Danny Filemote, who was notably a partial owner of Philair, serving as first officer for the flight. The aircraft departed from the Semendwa Airport, and the plane proceeded along its planned route as usual, without incident, when the 2 pilots in the cockpit began their landing procedures as the aircraft began its final approach towards the airport in Bandundu. However, unbeknownst to Chris and Danny in the cockpit, chaos would soon erupt aboard the aircraft, a chaos that would cut their lives abruptly short in a matter of a mere few moments. As the 2 pilots in the cockpit routinely ran through their usual landing procedures, back in the aircraft's cabin, one passenger, who was seated near the back of the aircraft, had brought aboard a duffel bag as his carry-on luggage, which, as the plane began to make its final approach, burst open as the cargo contained within it tore through the bag's canvas. From within this duffel bag emerged a crocodile, which, following its escape, began to meander throughout the cabin of the plane. The 3rd crew member, the cabin hostess, quickly spotted the escaped apex predator and let out a loud shriek and ran towards the front of the plane, away from the escaped crocodile. The cabin hostess's fearful outburst alerted the rest of the passengers in the cabin to the reptile's presence amongst them, and the panicked passengers instinctually rose from their seats and followed her lead, fleeing towards the front of the aircraft. However, the sudden flocking of the frightened passengers to the front of the plane consequentially had massively shifted the weight balance aboard the plane towards the front, which immediately sent the plane into a steep nosedive. As the flight data recorder aboard the aircraft would later reveal, the 2 pilots in the cockpit of the aircraft made their best efforts to correct the nosedive, but unfortunately, they were unable to do so before the aircraft slammed into a nearby residential home, which was fortunately unoccupied at the time of the collision, instantly killing all 3 crew members and 17 of the 18 passengers aboard the flight on impact. Notably, after striking the home, the plane's wreckage did not catch fire, which facilitated the rescue of the surviving passenger aboard the flight, who was rushed to nearby medical facilities in critical condition. The crocodile that had escaped from the duffel bag also survived the impact of the collision and was spotted by local villagers near the site of the crash, and upon spotting the crocodile, it was killed by the villagers with a machete. Due to the lack of the breakout of a post-impact fire, investigators initially suspected that the crash had been caused as a result of fuel exhaustion. However, upon reviewing the flight recorder's data, the fuel tanks were found to have been containing 150 liters of remaining fuel at the time of the crash. The full details of what had transpired aboard the aircraft would emerge after the surviving victim of the crash was interviewed by authorities and explained the unbelievable circumstances that had led to the aircraft's lethal nosedive. Upon learning this information, the passenger that had smuggled the crocodile aboard the flight was soon after identified, and his family and associates were interviewed in order to determine why exactly the man had brought the apex predator aboard the flight in the first place. Following these interviews, it was ascertained that the man had brought the reptile aboard in order to sell it in Bandundu's markets as bushmeat. This deadly collision served as the death knell to Phil as a company, which ultimately folded about 5 years after the incident's occurrence, as Phil was never able to fully shake the stigma that resulted from this fatal incident. This highly unusual and unfortunate crash also, notably, is the deadliest incident involving a Let L-410 turbolet to date, at least as of the time of making this video. Thank you all for watching.